I'm Mia Carter, 34 years old, and I've learned the hard way that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who are supposed to love you the most. My father, Daniel Carter, was the kind of man who built his identity on discipline, tradition, and pride. For 42 years, he worked at the same aerospace engineering firm, rising from junior draftsman to CEO. The company was his life. His two sons, my brother, were his legacy. And me? I was just there. The day before his retirement party, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror rehearsing a speech I wasn't even sure I wanted to give. A few polite words. A toast, maybe. Something neutral. Safe. Expected. Because that's how I'd lived most of my life, trying to avoid giving him more reasons to be disappointed. Behind me, in the reflection, the gift box sat on the dresser, wrapped in navy blue paper with a silver ribbon. Understated. Elegant. Inside was something small but meaningful. At least it had been once. As I ran through my lines, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That no matter what I said, it wouldn't matter. Because no matter what I did, it never did. Before I go any further, tell me in the comments, have you ever been overlooked by someone who is supposed to see your worth? If so, hit that like button and subscribe. This story might sound familiar, and maybe, just maybe, it will help you see things differently too. Growing up in Austin, Texas, the Carter house was orderly, traditional, and suffocating. We weren't poor, but affection was rationed like it cost extra. My brothers, Matthew and Josh, were classic all-American boys. Football, mechanics, Boy Scouts, military-bound. My father adored them. They could do no wrong. And then there was me. I was quiet, curious, obsessed with space and stars. I'd sneak science magazines into my room like other girls snuck fashion catalogs. I built a model rocket from scrap when I was 11. It actually launched. My mother clapped. My father asked if I'd stolen the parts. I learned early on that I didn't fit his mold. He never said it outright. He didn't need to. It was in the way he introduced my brothers at dinner parties. This is Matt, just promoted to captain, and Josh runs our advanced testing team now. Then he'd glance at me with a polite smile and say, and that's Mia. She's creative. Creative, as if it were a flaw. I graduated with honors in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan, while working 2 jobs to cover what scholarships didn't. No one from my family came to the ceremony. My father sent a brief text. Congrats. Didn't realize that was today. Still, I tried. I took the job no one expected me to get. Systems analyst at Caltech's Jet Propulsion Lab. I worked double shifts, submitted patents, co-authored papers. By 29, I was leading a division team. By 31, I was the youngest female engineering director in the organization's history. But at every family holiday, when Dad raised his glass, he toasted the boys. So when I got the invitation to his retirement gala, a black tie affair at the Hilton, with speeches, awards, and a slideshow of his professional journey, I almost didn't go. Almost. But something in me needed to be there. Not for him. For me. That week, I flew back to Austin, stayed at a hotel downtown, and tried to rehearse something neutral. Something that wouldn't make things worse. Something that wouldn't hurt. Because what I didn't tell anyone, not even my therapist, was that I still carried this stupid little hope inside me. That maybe, just maybe, this would be the night he'd finally say something different. Something real. Instead, the night would end with me handing him that wrapped box and walking away for good. But not yet. Because the rehearsal was still just that. A rehearsal. I still believed in some small, foolish way that maybe if I said the right words, wore the right dress, smiled just right, I could rewrite the story, fix what was broken. But I didn't know yet what he was going to say in his speech. And I didn't know how badly it would cut, or how freeing it would feel to finally bleed and walk away, standing tall. I arrived at the Hilton 20 minutes early, not because I wanted to, but because anxiety has a way of making me overcompensate. The valet reached for my keys and I hesitated. The black Tesla wasn't flashy by Los Angeles standards, but in my family, it screamed tech girl trying too hard. Still, I handed the keys over and walked in. The ballroom was already half full. Round tables dressed in white linen, floral centerpieces tall enough to block conversation, waiters moving like shadows. A slideshow of my father's career played on a loop behind the podium. His younger face filled the giant screen, standing in front of rocket prototypes, shaking hands with generals, presenting awards to others in suits that looked just like his. There were no family photos in the montage, no childhood birthdays, no Christmas mornings, just him in grayscale power poses, as if emotion would have contaminated the legacy. I stood near the entrance, scanning for familiar faces. My mother caught my eye from across the room and waved. A quick, discreet motion like someone avoiding attention. She always had a way of supporting me quietly, from the corners. "Look who finally made it," came a voice behind me. Matthew. He looked like a politician in training. Tailored suit, perfect teeth, fake tan. Josh followed close behind, giving me a brief nod as he adjusted his tie. "Mia," Matthew said, pulling me into a hug that felt like a business transaction. "Still working with NASA or SpaceX or whatever it is?" "Still at JPL," I answered, my voice neutral. "Right, the telescope place," Josh added. "Dad always says that's more science club than real engineering." I smiled, tight and rehearsed. "Well, we did help land a rover on Mars, so I guess we're doing something right." They laughed, not unkindly, just dismissively, and moved on to greet another cluster of guests. And just like that, I was back in high school. Invisible. The girl with the wrong kind of ambition. The wrong kind of dreams. A waiter passed with champagne. I took one. Across the room, I spotted my father, tall, composed, in a deep navy suit. He stood flanked by executives and former colleagues, his laugh booming, his hand gestures exaggerated, the retired king holding court. I waited for him to look my way. He didn't. But he looked at my brothers, clapped a hand on Josh's shoulder, gestured proudly. He looked at my mother and even gave her a rare kiss on the cheek. And when the event organizer asked everyone to take their seats, he didn't notice I was still standing at the edge of the room, quietly deciding whether I should have come at all. Just as I turned to leave, I felt a gentle tug on my arm. "Mia." My mother's voice was soft, but firm. "Please don't go. He'll say something. He has to. Tonight's about all of us." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that maybe, for once, he'd recognize more than just his two sons and their military titles. That maybe, after everything, he'd say my name with pride. But then the lights dimmed, and the MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate a titan of industry, a man who dedicated over 4 decades to aerospace advancement. Please welcome the one and only Daniel Carter." Thunderous applause erupted. My father walked on stage, waving like a senator, pausing for dramatic effect before he spoke. Thank you, he began. "This has been the journey of a lifetime, and I wouldn't be standing here without the support of my incredible family." I sat up straighter. He smiled. "My sons, Matthew and Josh, have always made me proud. Both of them followed in my footsteps. Both chose to serve, lead, build. Everything I achieved I owe to them. They represent the Carter name with strength and honor." Applause. People actually stood and clapped. Then his tone changed, soft, almost nostalgic. "Not every child has what it takes, and that's okay. Not everyone is cut from the same cloth. Some wander." He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. I felt the blood drain from my face. The words landed with a cold finality that only public humiliation can deliver. My daughter never had what it takes. That's what everyone heard. Or at least what they took from it. And when the laughter came, small, polite, but sharp, it cut deeper than any silence ever could. I stood. Every eye turned to me. I walked up slowly, not to the stage, but to the edge of it. I held the small, navy-wrapped box in both hands. My voice didn't shake. "From your biggest failure," I said calmly, handing him the gift. "Enjoy your retirement." And I turned, heels clicking across polished marble, not a single part of me rushing, or running, or shrinking. I didn't look back. I didn't drive home immediately after leaving the ballroom. Instead, I parked in a quiet corner of the hotel garage, engine off, hands frozen on the steering wheel. My chest was tight, but not with panic. Not anymore. What I felt was something slower, colder, like standing outside in a snowstorm you saw coming for years and only now decided to walk into. On my passenger seat, my evening clutch buzzed. A text from Mom. Another from Sophia, my closest friend from college who'd begged me not to attend the retirement party in the first place. And then another one. "What was in the box?" That one was from Josh. I didn't answer. I didn't even open the messages, because I already knew that the moment was unfolding inside that ballroom, the one I had walked out of, and the one I still hadn't entirely left behind. I knew my father wouldn't open the box immediately, not in front of the crowd. He was too composed for that, too concerned with optics. But the curiosity would eventually win, because if there's one thing Daniel Carter hated more than weakness, it was not being in control. It would take him less than 10 minutes. The box was small. Inside, it was a single framed photograph, one he had probably forgotten existed. A print I'd kept in a worn folder at the bottom of my closet for over 20 years. It was a photo of the two of us, taken when I was 12. We were at a local science fair. I had built a model of the International Space Station from soda cans and wire. He hadn't wanted to come. Mom practically dragged him there. I remembered how stiff he looked in the crowd, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like it was a waste of time. But something had shifted that day. Because I won. First place. District-wide. And for 5 whole minutes, he'd looked proud. Someone had snapped the picture at just the right moment. Me holding my blue ribbon, him with his hand on my shoulder, smiling. A real smile. Not the clipped, forced one he used in corporate photos. That moment was the last time I ever remember him looking at me like I wasn't a mistake. I'd kept the photo, waiting for the right time to give it back to him. Not as a trophy, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of what he'd chosen to forget. Beneath the frame, I had placed a note. In simple handwriting, it read, "This was the last time you looked at me like I mattered. I spent 20 years chasing that version of you. I'm done now." He'd open that box and see himself. Not the version he polished for his legacy reel, but the one who could have been a father. The one who, even if just for 5 minutes, was. Back in the car, I didn't cry. I thought I would. But instead, I felt something else. A strange kind of quiet. It's hard to explain. It's what happens when you finally stop climbing a mountain that was never going to lead anywhere. When you realize the peak you've been aiming for was just a painted wall. Beautiful from a distance. Hollow up close. I pulled out my phone. Not to respond, but to check social media. Sure enough, someone had already posted a video clip from the speech. You couldn't hear what I said as I walked to the stage. The audio cut out. But you could see the way I handed him the box. Calm, measured, controlled. And then turned and left, not a tremor in my step. The comments were mixed. Some thought it was staged. Others applauded the power move. A few criticized me for ruining a special moment. But what struck me most were the quiet ones. The DMs from strangers. "I wish I had your courage. He sounds like my dad." That line, "from your biggest failure," hit me hard. I didn't respond. Not yet. But I read them all. Because for the first time in my life, someone was listening. Someone was seeing me. Not just as a footnote in someone else's story, but as the author of my own. And somewhere inside that ballroom, Daniel Carter was holding a photograph he couldn't rewrite. the image of a girl he had discarded, and the version of himself he had buried. The first call came just before midnight. I let it ring, then the second, then the third. By the time my phone lit up for the sixth time, I finally looked at the screen. Mom. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the green icon. Then I picked up. Mia, she said, her voice brittle and urgent. What was in that box? I didn't answer right away. I could hear voices in the background, muffled, angry. My father's voice low and sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. You already know, I said quietly. It was the only memory I ever had of him being proud of me. She didn't speak at first. Then, you blindsided him. I nearly laughed. No, Mom. He's been blindsiding me for 30 years. A long silence passed. Finally, she whispered, He didn't mean to hurt you, Mia. He doesn't know how to show things. He was raised to believe emotions are weakness. I wasn't asking for tears, I said, my voice flat. Just acknowledgement. And after tonight, I'm done asking. I hung up before she could reply. Because the truth was, I didn't trust what would come next, her apology or her excuse. Maybe both. The next morning, I turned off my phone and spent hours walking aimlessly through downtown Austin. It felt surreal, watching people sip lattes and jog with headphones while the emotional equivalent of a bomb had gone off inside my life. By noon, I turned it back on. 38 unread messages. I skipped the ones from Matthew and Josh. I already knew what they'd say. Defend Dad, accuse me of ruining the night, accuse me of being dramatic, selfish, cold. But one message stood out. From Dad. Just 2 words. We need to talk. I stared at it for a long time. There was no anger in those words, no apology either. Just 5 syllables that felt like a summons. Later that evening, I found myself driving toward my childhood home. Not out of obligation, but out of something harder to define. Closure, maybe. Or curiosity. The house looked the same. Red brick. Perfect lawn. The porch light always left on. Like nothing ever changed, even when everything had. I let myself in with the old key. Inside, it smelled like lemon polish and nostalgia. I found him in the den, alone, sitting in his armchair, holding the photo frame. He didn't look up when I entered. For a full minute, we sat in silence. Then, without looking at me, he said, I don't remember that day. Of course you don't, I said. It was important to me. That made him flinch. Subtle, but there. He set the photo on the coffee table. You think I never cared? I don't think it. I lived it. I pushed you, he said quietly, because I saw something in you, something sharp, unrelenting. No, I corrected. You pushed me away. There's a difference. Finally, he looked at me. I didn't know how to handle you. You weren't like the boys. You didn't seek approval. You challenged it. You challenged me. I folded my arms. And that made me less worthy of respect? He hesitated, like the answer was complicated, but he didn't know how to say it out loud. You reminded me of your grandfather, he finally said. The way you questioned everything, the way you hated tradition. He never approved of me either. There it was. The lineage of resentment passed down like an heirloom. I sank into the edge of the sofa, suddenly exhausted. So I spent my life being punished for something that had nothing to do with me. You were never a failure, Mia, he said. I just didn't know how to raise a daughter like you. You didn't try, I replied. You just ignored me until I gave up trying to be seen. He looked at me again, really looked this time. I saw you. I just didn't know what to do with what I saw. That was the closest I'd ever get to an apology. And strangely, it was enough. Not because it made things okay. It didn't. But because I finally realized I had spent my whole life trying to earn something he was never equipped to give. And that wasn't my failure. It was his. 2 weeks passed before I fully realized the weight I'd been carrying was gone. Not lessened. Not temporarily lifted. Gone. It didn't leave with a dramatic scream or some grand confrontation. It left quietly, like a tenant who'd been squatting in the corners of my soul for too long and finally packed up in the middle of the night. The need for approval. The ache for acknowledgement. The fantasy that one day my father would look at me and say, "You're enough." He wouldn't. And somehow that truth no longer crushed me. It freed me. I flew back to Los Angeles on a Sunday morning. The plane coasted over sun-warmed mountains and glittering coastlines, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was escaping something. I was simply going home. Back to a life I had built with my own 2 hands. No shortcuts, no family name carrying me. Just hard work, long hours, and the belief that I could turn pain into propulsion. JPL welcomed me back like I hadn't just detonated decades of personal history. The lab was busy prepping a major project, the launch of a new satellite array designed to study deep space radiation patterns. I was overseeing the risk and systems analysis, and though the work was intense, it felt grounding. One afternoon, about 10 days after my return, my division head stopped by my office. "You're still good for the keynote next month?" she asked. I blinked. "The STEM Summit?" She nodded. "You're the first female lead from JPL to be invited in a decade. And given your background, your story could mean a lot to the younger women in the audience." I knew what she meant by your background. She didn't mean the math or the science. She meant the fact that I hadn't come from the expected places, that I'd had to navigate male-dominated spaces without a cheerleader in my corner, that I'd succeeded despite, not because of, my family. "I'm in," I said. "Absolutely." That night, I sat on my apartment balcony overlooking the city lights and opened my laptop. The first line of the speech came instantly. Sometimes the greatest fuel for a rocket isn't fire, it's rejection. I told the truth. About growing up in a house where being a daughter meant being doubted. About how brilliance can be ignored if it doesn't wear the right name or play by the right rules. About how painful it is to be invisible in your own family. And how powerful it is when you finally stop waiting to be seen. And I ended it with a message I wish someone had told me at 16, or 22, or even 30. You are not obligated to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you. Some legacies are worth breaking, and sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is walk away. Not in anger, but in clarity. The video of that speech would later go viral, but that wasn't the point. The point was, I meant every word. My brothers didn't reach out. Not after the party. Not after the fallout. And that was fine. I had stopped chasing people who only saw me as a problem to manage. My mom called a few times. Our conversations were cautious, gentle, like tiptoeing across ice. But slowly, the words began to thaw. "I should have done more," she said once. "I should have stepped in." "I know," I replied. "But I also know you loved me, even if you couldn't always show it in front of him." The most unexpected moment came in the mail. A small envelope, no return address. Inside was a photo. The same photo. The one I had given my father. On the back, a note, handwritten in the sharp, measured block letters I recognized as his. I didn't forget this day. I just tried to. Because it scared me how much I loved that version of you. You deserved more than I gave. I'm sorry. No signature. No warm closing. Just that. I stared at the note for a long time, then folded it and placed it in the same drawer where I used to keep every disappointing birthday card he'd ever given me. The drawer wasn't filled with pain anymore. It was filled with perspective. Because sometimes the apology doesn't come the way you wanted, and sometimes it doesn't come until after you've stopped needing it. That's what healing looks like. It's not clean. It's not cinematic. But it's real. And it's enough. So, if you're watching this and you've ever felt like the invisible one, the failure, the odd one out, know this. You don't have to earn someone's love to be worthy of it. Walk tall. Walk forward. And if you need to, walk away. It's strange how endings rarely feel like endings when they actually happen. You think they'll be loud, definitive, cinematic. But more often, they arrive in silence, on a Tuesday afternoon while folding laundry, or on a quiet Sunday morning when your phone doesn't ring, and you realize you're finally okay with that. 3 months had passed since my father's retirement party, since the night I handed him the wrapped box, since I stopped performing for a man who only ever clapped for my brothers. My story, or at least the part of it that people saw, had gained traction online. The speech at the STEM Summit was shared by women in tech groups, engineering schools, even career coaching blogs. A journalist reached out. They wanted to write a profile, not just about the viral moment, but about what it meant to grow up invisible in your own home and still become someone worth seeing. At first, I hesitated, but then I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was the story of every girl who sat in the back of the room while her brother got the spotlight. Every daughter who was told she was too emotional, too difficult, not enough. Every woman who worked twice as hard for half the credit and still showed up the next day. So, I said yes. The article was titled, "The Failure Who Made It." It opened with the scene from the retirement gala. Me standing up, handing my father a box, and walking away without a word. But what mattered more was everything that came after. The work, the resilience, the choice to redefine worth on my own terms. One paragraph stood out to me more than any other. It read, "Mia Carter didn't burn bridges. She simply stopped building them where they were never meant to lead." That line stayed with me, because for years I thought setting boundaries was selfish. That walking away from family expectations made me cold or ungrateful. But now I understood. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. They show you what to let in and what to walk away from. Not long after the article ran, I got a message from a name I didn't recognize at first. Elena Carter, my cousin, my father's sister's daughter. We hadn't spoken in years, barely even knew each other. Her message read, "I read your story. It made me cry. You probably don't know this, but my dad treated me the same way. Always said boys were the future. Girls were a decoration. I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did. Thank you for showing me it's not too late to rewrite the story." I responded with a single line. "It's never too late to stop shrinking." That's the part nobody tells you. You don't heal all at once. It's not a light switch. It's a dimmer. Some days are bright. Some are shadowed. But the light builds, bit by bit. I still hadn't spoken to my father since his note, the one he'd sent anonymously with the photo I'd given him. It hadn't said "I love you." It hadn't asked to meet. But in its own broken way, it had said, "I see it now." And honestly, that was enough. Because I no longer needed him to say the right words. I had stopped waiting for his permission to feel worthy. I had learned to speak those words to myself. I love who I've become. I love the girl who kept showing up even when no one clapped. The woman who stopped asking to be chosen and started choosing herself. The next time I visited Austin, it wasn't to see my parents. It was for a panel at the local university. Girls in engineering, first-generation college students, dreamers with scraped knees and brilliant minds. I told them the truth, that sometimes your biggest obstacle wears your last name, that proving people wrong isn't nearly as powerful as proving yourself right, and that no matter where you start, or who ignores you, you are never a failure for being different. You are only a failure if you stop showing up for yourself. Afterward, a girl no older than 19 walked up to me and asked, "How did you know when it was time to stop trying to win his approval?" I smiled. "I didn't," I said. "I just woke up one day and realized I already had mine."